Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, especially in my systemic functional linguistic series. In the last video, we have discussed the core concept of SFL, metafunction, and in this video, we will discuss another core concept uh, called register. And as you can see here, this is just an introduction to register. So yeah, we just cover uh, the general points, the most important points in the register concept in SFL. As usual, let's take a look at the outline to see what this video will cover. First, we will see the meaning of register. And then we will come to register and metafunction to see how register and metafunction connect. And then we will go down to register variables, including the field, tenor, mode. Also, before we conclude the conclusion, we will see closed and open registers to understand what they mean and to see the examples of each registers. Okay, without further ado, let's talk about this. I hope that you still remember the discussion we had in the second video about text and context. Because register is about the context of situation. Register refers to the variation in language that depends on the context or situation. So, what we are going to discuss in this video is about the variation in language, which is influenced by the context of situation. In other words, uh, how can we identify the context of situation based on the text itself without looking outside the text? As Halliday believes that the context determines what we say and what we say determines the context. Okay, maybe you ever wondered why we use language differently in different situations. Let's take a look at these examples. These two examples basically carry similar meaning, which is the speaker require or demand information. But when we see the example A, we can identify the situation. Oh, this is an formal situation. This language, this text is used or is created in a formal situation. Meanwhile, the example B is maybe in informal situation. How do we know that? We can see at the number of words the complexity of the structure. It can be said that informal situation, for example, let's say that this is an email. We know that this is an email because there is the word writing here, and instead of using ask, the writer use request, okay, and so on and so forth. Regarding, but instead of use about, he or she uses regarding. Compared to the example B, there is informal uh, words like, hey, can you tell me about that scholarships, like that. So we can also identify that the example B uh, may represent the interaction between uh, equal persons, like me and my friend, like I and my friend, and so on and so forth. But when we compare these examples. Maybe we will say that the example A is better than example B, but it is not. It is not working that way. Okay, because register is not about uh, right and wrong. Okay, but it is about whether the language used is appropriate in the given context. Register is about appropriate language use in context, especially the context of situation. Also, register describes different ways to express the same meaning based on the immediate setting in which the text unfolds. As I said previously, that both examples carry similar meaning, that the speaker demands information regarding the scholarships, but he or she uses the language differently because of the context or situation. Now, how register and metafunction connect? As we have discussed in the previous video about metafunction, we saw that metafunction describes the functions of text, including representing ideas or experience, enacting social relationship or interaction, and organizing message coherently and cohesively. We also saw that text carries multiple meanings simultaneously, including what the text is about or ideational meaning, who is involved or interpersonal meaning, and how the text is structured or the textual meaning. So how register connects to it? Register connects to it because it provides us with a series or a set of choices, lexicogrammatical choices based on the situation, the immediate situation or the immediate context. There are three variables in register and each of them connects to the types of metafunction. As we can see here, if the function of language is to express ideas, that is the meta that is the function of language from the metafunctional perspective. But in the reality, when we want to express idea, we will choose particular lexicogrammatical choices based on the register, especially the field variable. When we want to express interpersonal meaning, we will also see the relationship between us and the addressee, for example, and that is activated by the tenor variable of the register. And when we want to uh, express the textual meaning, the lexicogrammatical choices will be made based on the mode of the discourse or the mode variable of the register. In other words, we can say that register describes how the metafunctions are activated or how meanings are created based on the situation. The most important point to be understood here is that register describes language as a set of choice. Grammar is a set of choice, not rules. So we choose words, we choose structure based on the situation. Okay? Just like what we saw in the previous slide, that register is not about true or false, not about right and wrong, but about appropriateness of the language used based on the context of situation. So that's how register and metafunction connect. Now we look at the first register variable, the field, or the field of discourse. Field refers to what is happening in the situation, the topic, the type of social activity, the domain of the discourse, or the subject matter. They answer the questions, what is the text about? So that is the question, what is the text about? And the answer will be the field. Okay. Now let's take a look at these examples. Add 2 cups of flour and stir until smooth. The government announced new tax policies. He kicked the ball straight into the goal. So, based on these examples, we should be able to identify the field of each example. If we look at the example A, we can identify that this seems to be a part or text in a receipt, okay? Like cooking. This is about cooking. The topic is about cooking something. How do we know that? Because of the word like cups, add 2 cups, flour, stir, and so on, so forth. These words are used in that field, usually in that field. Okay? The government announced new tax policies. The field of this text seems to be politics. How do you know that? Because the words used in the text. Okay? And then the example C is easy to identify, to be identified. The field can be identified. Or the field is sport, football, for example, right? Because the word kick, ball, the goal, and so on and so forth. So we can say that the lexicogrammatical choices, the words and structures made in the text define their fields, and vice versa, of course. I mean, uh, when talking about cooking, for example, uh, I think the words like flour, steel, cups, and so on and so forth cannot be easily replaced by other synonyms which are more suitable or appropriate to you in other context. But we need to understand that the same text can also be analyzed in terms of other registered variables as well. Alright? So just because we will use different examples, it doesn't mean that this text only contains or can only be identified in terms of field. No, we can also identify the tenor and the mode from each of the texts as well. The second register variable is tenor, or the tenor of the discourse. Tenor refers to the participants and the social relationship between them. I mean, the participants involved in the linguistic interaction. We need to answer the question like who is taking part and what is the relationship like to find the tenor. Is the relationship equal, like between students, or unequal, like between student and the teacher? Let's see the example. Example A. Could you please open the window? And then open the window, please. Open the window. So we see that these examples carry similar meanings that demanding a good and service. This is exchange. This is text as exchange related to the interpersonal metafunction to express the interpersonal meaning. As we have discussed previously in the previous video, interpersonal meaning is related to the mood system, which describes text or language as interaction, as exchange of the community, whether it is information, exchange information. Exchange here means either give or demand, and these examples demand the same action or good and service. In this case, is to get the window open. We can see that different modes are used because the participants are different. What does it mean? The modes here, for example A, is an interrogative as if it is a question, it is a request. Meanwhile, for B and C, both are command, but B is a soft command while the C is a straight or direct command. And these different modes are used because the participants are different. By looking at the example A, we can identify the tenor, the participants uh, involved in the interaction. Could you please open the window? This is like a polite expression, yeah, of interpersonal meaning of demanding someone to do something, and usually it's because either the participants are not familiar each other or they have different status. They have unequal status. The power distance. There is a power distance, social power. I mean, like that. So, tenor is about the human relationship that shapes the lexical grammatical choice. So, our relationship with the addressee, or if you are a writer, your relationship with the reader will shape the way you choose words and structure. The last registered variable is called mode, or the mode of the discourse. As you can see here, that mode deals with how language is being used. To identify the mode, we need to answer some questions like these questions. Is the communication spoken or written? Is it planned or spontaneous? Is it face to face or mediated through text? Okay, so the answers to these questions will help us to identify the mode of the discourse. I mean, by looking at the text, we can identify, or we should be able to identify whether it is a spoken text, spoken written text, for example. Is it planned or spontaneous interaction? Is it face to face or indirect communication? Let's take a look at these examples. These two examples, if we look at the field, we could identify that the field of this text are about answering questions like a test or an exam. How do we know that? Of course, because there are words like answer, and in in the second example, we obviously have the word questions. So these texts are used in the classroom, for example, in the examination. However, we can see the difference between these two texts, including the size or the length of the text. The example A is shorter than the second example, this example B, and we can see that, or we can predict that the example A is a kind of spoken interaction, spoken text, like uh, the teacher says to the students to answer the questions in 10 minutes. Why we say that this is a spoken interaction and face-to-face interaction especially? Because this text lack the word like questions. Alright, now answer this in 10 minutes. This what? This refers to what? We don't know it. Except it is a spoken face-to-face interaction where all participants have access to the reference of the word this. So this may mean questions, and those questions may be written on the whiteboard or projected on the wall or written or on papers that students already have. Okay. Meanwhile, the example B seems to be written expressions because the writer provides sufficient information to to avoid repeating the text, repeating the words. Okay, so what we can say here is that the mode affects the level of context dependence, as we can see here that the interpretation of this text will depend on the context. And then grammatical complexity, as we can see here that the written expression is more complex in terms of the lexical grammar because the writer needs to provide adequate information to clarify or to make sure that the reader understands the meaning of the text. And cohesive devices. Cohesive devices are used to structure the text, but in this case, we can think like this. In spoken interaction, we can repeat what we have said to clarify or to make sure that the listener understands what we are saying. But in the written communication, in the written text, we usually avoid repeating what we have said. So that's why we need to create the text as cohesive as possible to not only to avoid repetition but also to guide the readers to navigate the meaning of the text. So that is how the mode of communication or the mode of the discourse affects or influence the lexicogrammatical choice in the text. Alright, the last thing that I want to show you in this video is about closed and open registers. This way of classifying register is based on the type of particular situation in which the language is highly predictable and restricted by conventions, which means that the way we communicate in that situation uh, is regulated in particular conventions that we cannot uh, break. For example, the example A here uh, is an example of a pilot talking to the people in the air traffic control on the ground. Let's listen to the audio.
Tower, this is Flight 302 requesting clearance for takeoff.
Okay, the reason why I provide an audio here is because most often than not, in closed register situation, not only is the lexicogrammatical choice restricted, but also the way the words are pronounced or the intonation in expressing the what the meaning is also restricted. And what we can say here is that the pilot cannot change the way or cannot change the lexicogrammar of this text, although uh, the participants at the other end is his wife or his friends, which means that they are or they have equal status. But no, in closed register situation, they need to follow the convention of the text of the text. And example B is an example of a lawyer expressing disagreement by announcing objection like that. There is no way to change this expression. For example, like, oh, I disagree with you on that point. So as we can see that the example B and D carries the same meaning, but in the open register or the situation where language use is more flexible, like like the other examples that I have provided you with in the previous slides. In the open register situation, we can reformulate the expressions as long as it is appropriate based on the context of situation. But in the closed situations, like in code, for example, uh, the way we express the meaning of the lexicogrammatical choice is extremely restricted or limited. Okay, so now we come to the conclusion part. So we have discussed what the register is and then how it connects with the metafunction. We can conclude that register is the variation in language according to the context of situation, shaped by three contextual variables like the field, the tenor, and the mode. Register also explains why language differs across situation, and by understanding register, we can identify appropriate we can teach, not identify, but we can teach the students, for example, how to use or appropriate lexicogrammatical choice, to how to make correct choices in using words and structure based on the given situation. Also, there are situations where language choice is restricted, and then language as a choice emphasizes the appropriateness of lexicogrammatical choice based on the situation in which the text unfolds. It is not about the right or wrong, the true or false, the correct or incorrect, but it is about the appropriateness of our language based on the situation, based on what we are talking about, with whom, and in what way. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.